three-dimensionality is the goal, but of course it's a, absurd thing to think that ink on the page is going to create some sort of three-dimensionality, but that's the magic and beauty and kind of challenge of what we try to do is use ink to create pictures in your head that are, somewhat layered, like you say, that there's lots of aspects and facets to one life, and you can see how they're processing the scenes that they're taking in to help the reader process the scene too.
This is Story to Count with Jen Jumba. In conversations with writers, something magical happens. And as readers, we begin to see them as human beings and not just the name on the spine of a book. My hope is through these conversations, you learn about their craft, them as a person, and you'll become like me, fiercely loyal, want to read their current book, entire backlist, or any future book they write. And when you see their name, you want to support them, not only as the incredible storytellers, but the thoughtful individuals you have come to know. My guest today is Mark Stevens. He's the author of the Flynn Martin thriller series, including No Lie Lasts Forever and Two Truths and a Lie, which just published. So happy Pub Week.
Thank
you.
The
Fireballer. The Allison Coyle mystery series, including Antler Dust, Buried by the Rhone, Trapline, Lake of Fire, and The Melancholy Howl. Mark is an award-winning writer. Buried by the Rhone, Trapline, and Lake of Fire were all finalists for the Colorado Book Award. Trapline won. Mark has published several short stories in Ellery Queen Magazine, Mystery Tribune, and Denver Noir. Denver Noir went on to win the Colorado Book Award for the Best Anthology in 2023. I have read several city noir books and found them to be not only fantastic stories, but also a great introduction to writers who might be new to you. Mark was one of 3 co-editors for Four Corner Voices, an anthology of fiction, essays, and poetry that won the Colorado Book Award for Best Anthology in 2025. You see, there's a trend. He continues to write and win. In 2016, and again in 2023, Mark was named the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writer of the Year. For 10 years, Mark has hosted a regular podcast for Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers. You can check it out on YouTube. A little nervous now because he knows what podcasts are supposed to sound like. He has also served as the president of the Rocky Mountain chapter for Mystery Writers of America and regularly publishes reviews on his review website. Now, I was fortunate enough to moderate a panel with Mark last fall at a conference and read the first in the Flynn Martin series. Instantly a fan of his storytelling as well as Flynn as a character. And I am so happy to see the series of Flynn continue. So thanks for joining in.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Great to see you. Great to, be in conversation. I appreciate it.
No problem. Can you introduce us to this next adventure in the Flynn Martin series?
Sure. Well, I think the way to set it up kind of is to say at the outset that when I wrote No Lie Lasts Forever, the first book in the series, which has its own long backstory because I wrote the first draft 24 years ago, and it was a book that stayed in my background of my other projects for a long, long time, and finally made its way to its first editor just about 2 years ago. And the first editor who ever read it, bought it. But that's its own little publishing journey, agent woes, kind of mayhem that every writer goes through. But when No Lie Lasts Forever sold, in my mind, I think in my agent's mind, it was a standalone. It was a one and done, over and out, call it good book. The editor who read it said, no, in fact, this will be a trilogy. And because when she said that, I just kind of shrugged my shoulders and said, how the heck is that going to happen? Because without giving too much away, the bad guy has been caught. He's off to prison. And she said, make it work. The old Tim Gunn line from Project Runway, I guess, make it work, people, make it work. And so I just kind of went back into No Lie before it got published and created a few little cracks in the eggshell of the story so that book 2 could leak out. So I'd be glad to just give a little overview of the situation for both books, if that would help here.
Absolutely. And I need to write a thank you note to the editor who said this is a trilogy.
Jessica Tribblewell. So, amazing. So Um, the basic premise for No Light Lasts Forever is a case of mutual redemption. You have a retired serial killer, a guy hiding in plain sight. He's very happy, content to have been successful 15 years ago. His last crime was 15 years prior. He is hoping to go down in history as having never been caught. He's a bureaucrat for the State Department of Education in Colorado. He's working in human resources. He's a classical music fan. He just is going about his life and hoping that his legacy is intact. The other main character is a female, a veteran female television reporter who makes a mistake in the middle of a dicey live situation that's being captured and being watched all over Metro Denver. And because of her mistake, an innocent person is killed and she is taken off air by her station. When a new serial murder victim turns up that looks very much like the work of our retired guy, he is furious because he doesn't want any digging into his old cases. He doesn't want a new spark that fires up a whole new investigation into his legacy. And also, he's just furious that anybody is trying to copy his handiwork. So he knows that she is in need of redemption as well. She needs to get her job back. And if he can feed her the right information, she can work her way through figuring out who committed this new crime. At first, she is extremely wary and disbelieving that this is the same guy who could have committed all these crimes 15 years ago. So she dismisses his attempt to reach out to her, and he finally in a very dramatic way convinces her it's him. So just quickly at the end of book one, after all the other shenanigans that happen in book one, it's pretty well wrapped up as far as he is concerned, and that's not too much of a spoiler. But at the beginning of book two, she's trying to get back to her journalistic life. She gets on a story about a family that's disappeared from their house. And as that is beginning, as she's digging into that, she starts getting notes from another anonymous source.
Yeah. It is an incredibly suspenseful book for sure. Both of them were. And Flynn Martin is the journalist, the on camera, got her career back on track after being able to capture. Not really a spoiler, won't say how. And so she thinks she kind of has everything back together, her life back together, her sense of self back together, because that was a very uncomfortable situation, grisly situation. And so she moves. She moves to a new building thinking clean start, clean slate. She also has a young son. And so all of a sudden to show up where this family of four just disappeared and then find a note on her car, especially in today's world where everybody seems to have Ring cameras, everybody seems to be filming something or taking a photo of something. It's just incredible. And so then I, as the reader, felt probably just as unsettled as Flynn did. How does he know? How does, this person know where she is when she's going to be there?
That's the idea.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
And it's tough because she gains attention two ways. First, with the catastrophic error in the thing that her station pulled her from that kind of inspired the guy. And then she's back on air and everybody knows who she is. I mean, and we see that a lot. We see news people, we see athletes, we see celebrities, and we kind of think we know them. They can't go to the grocery store like you and I would. Well, maybe you can't because you're, an award-winning writer. But
I can, but nobody knows me.
But it's that kind of like anonymity that we kind of have as, regular, normal people that isn't afforded to somebody who chooses that as a career. So can you talk a little bit about that and how that influenced the story?
Sure. I mean, I think you're spot on. She is carrying around quite a bit of baggage. And the fact that it happened on television, something that people can talk about. I think we can look at any given day when you open up the news and see some of those characters who just get into our mainstream consciousness and are put on these viral videos that just have a real staying power in the public's mind. So in Denver, she was a pretty well-known reporter, very well-known reporter. If you're a reporter in the same town for about 20 years, you're going to be well known to begin with. If you make a mistake, and a mistake that looks like a mistake of kind of hubris and overconfidence in your own self, and you're vilified for that mistake and you feel the tragedy. I mean, Flynn Martin certainly feels the tragedy of what happened to the innocent person who's killed. She is kind of climbing her way back into kind of getting back to even keel with the public, her relationship with the public. And Two Truths and a Lie starts, I think it's about a year and a half after the events at No Lie ended. So she's already done some of the processing, but the Two Truths starts with Harry, the end of Harry's trial when he's being sentenced. And well, at the end of his trial. And so we sort of pick up on that, but we still see that Flynn is haunted, definitely haunted by everything that's happened. And everywhere she goes, people bring it up.
Right. I think it's interesting. There's a line in the book talking about that hauntingness, is that once you believe something, everything becomes evidence to support your view of the world. I just think how true that is. And we can mention something random here, and then we just have this hyper awareness and we'll see it everywhere or hear it everywhere.
Yeah. And Flynn is battling that the whole time with her sources she's trying to develop, with people she knows in the business, her existing contacts. I think, there's a predictability sometimes for reporters knowing even ahead of time when they call this person with that organization, they're going to get that kind of a comment. They already know the point of view. It's been established. In today's world, and I think it's terrible, there's not a willingness to step back from a position and look at new facts that are coming in or new trends or new data, or just reconsider your opinion, whether you're a private citizen or you're a paid representative for a government organization or a private company. You're paid to have those views. And it doesn't really model curiosity or just openness to the fact that the world might be changing and there might be new information that's valuable about understanding how the world ticks.
Yeah, you bring up a point. It was a theme that I kind of noticed throughout this book in terms of media and what their responsibility is, in terms of communicating. And there's a line, it's a big responsibility broadcasting irresponsible, false, or harmful information. The news media's role is to inform, not to mislead. So I think
Yeah.
I agree 100% is that, you're only hearing that perspective. There might be 10 other facets, but you won't know those 10 other facets as a viewer because you're only told so many.
What's happened today, there's so many, the media has fractured into so many splinters, and there are organizations that look like media and appear like media and go through all the same motions that, when they publish or when they air a story, they look legitimate. But the legitimate news organizations that have a process for fact checking, that are willing to be held accountable to the people that they're covering, and will make corrections, do follow-up stories, who will publish breaking news, and then the next day there's a new iteration, a new insight into what happened, that will go through a process of really making sure that they're doing the best job to be accurate. Those folks are different than these crackpots who are trying to make it look like they've done the same kind of homework and research as the legitimate news organization. So Flynn and all these other folks who are trained and feel responsible, they feel responsible for putting out good information. Those people still exist, and they should be respected by our communities and not, be the target of rotten tomatoes that are being thrown every day at these folks.
I agree. I think sometimes there's a race to be first versus a race to be right. And dare I say, as a librarian, in terms of information and finding critical information that is vetted, that is fair balanced, it is a skill. And in today's day and age, when so many things are coming at us, not everybody's going to take the time to vet something, or is this really credible type of information in the sources? Because that takes time. And it's something that we don't seem to have a lot of anymore.
So true. Yep, exactly.
Can we talk a little bit about this amazing group of people that Flynn is surrounded by, from Max to Michael to Mika?
Yeah, with having a female lead, um, I wanted to give her, even in the first book, because in No Lie Lasts Forever, the antagonist is male. I didn't think it would have worked to have a male TV reporter. Thought it'd be more interesting and more dynamic to have a female lead, and also to give her a young son. He's 10 in No Lie Lasts Forever, and I think he's 12 in Two Truths and a Lie. So she can be extra protective about him. She's a single mom. She has a good relationship with her ex, Max, who is a cop, and she has a really good relationship with her boss, Rick Goodman, who's pretty steady egg in her world. She has a caring relationship with Wyatt, and she has a really important relationship with her father, Michael, who is a veteran print journalist, former print journalist, who's now a citizen journalist doing his own thing, but still following his same old processes. And he is somebody who's always kind of looked askance at her decision to go into the more show busy television side of things, but of course loves her and respects her. So you have Michael the father, Max the ex, Wyatt the son, Rick the boss. And because she's a single mom, of course, we got to start thinking about a new love interest in Two Truths. And she's got a new boyfriend circling around as well. So I wanted to make sure there were a lot of guys in her orbits.
And I wonder if her behavior is influenced by having a lot of guys in her life, because she has this sense of fearlessness, where, some people would say, well, let's just hold off and wait on that. She'll go in and investigate something or look for something when nobody else is around. You don't have cell service, or it's incredibly hot, or it's late at night. It's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. I don't know the motivation necessarily. I don't know if Flynn would need that. I think her father's kind of tenaciousness is what she's picking up on and just pouring that into her medium, television. I have spent 20 years in news as a journalist, and a bunch of those years in television news. And whether print or broadcast, I've met so many thoughtful, smart, hard driving, talk about fearless women who just will knock on any door any time of night. Their goal is to figure out what's going on and get the story. And there are plenty of people out there who just understand the importance of not letting any kind of shyness or intimidation from government or private organizations get in their way.
I completely agree in terms of the tenaciousness of Flynn, which is quite fun. And I'm glad that you chose to highlight that, especially in today's world, so that, we kind of look a little bit differently or question a little bit differently where we're getting our news or who's telling the news story, to make sure that, we're getting the whole story, that it's transparent, that it's not slated towards one view or agenda versus another. And
Right.
this
Right.
this comes up a lot in the book in terms of what stories are chosen to be reported. And that whole cadence in terms of, like, there's a great line in there about people wanting to know, how do you reach a decision about what gets airtime and how much resources to throw at a story? And it's a great question.
It's so random if you really stop and think about it. And you really stop and think about the size of a city of Denver, New York, Chicago, LA, whatever it might be, and the number of reporters running around covering stories. It is, there's so many factors, and it can be so entirely random. I sometimes watch the national news, and there might be a little bus crash that nobody was hurt, but there's dramatic footage of the bus in the river or something. And why is that national news? It's just because there's dramatic footage. It looks sensational. You're instantly telling the viewer to imagine if you're a parent of a kid in that school bus, you're giving them a shock. It's not really national news that a bus ran into a river and nobody was hurt. And this happens in Metro Denver on a daily basis. It's a product of so much influence from it's always been interesting to me that government agencies and occasionally private companies, they'll spend a lot of money to try to attract reporters to cover something, and they'll throw a press conference and nobody will come, and a couple of straggler reporters might come, or they'll send out some B team folks, and they will spend a lot of money to try to draw people into something good they're doing. And the minute something goes awry and the reporters all come out, then they spend a lot of money trying to get those reporters to go away. Like, don't, let's not give them everything. Let's make sure that this story ends, kill this story, make sure it doesn't happen. Well, throughout any day, I mean, of course, there are the major stories, and we can all imagine what those might be, and they're horrific in some cases. But there's just these kind of conversational issues that in any one day, a TV station could stop. They could spend a week looking at child poverty or the foster
Mhm.
care system or hunger or education, or there's just all these things that could be poured into the mix. And when you think about the size of any city and the number of reporters trying to cover it, and let's say it's even a small town of 1,200 or 15,000 with one reporter, where 15,000 people, any one of those could be involved in the story on any given day. So it's always a snapshot. It's always a kind of a crapshoot of what gets covered. And there are some people out there very glad that something happened and the news media never came around, or they're waiting for it to come around.
I think there's an example in there in the story that talks to that point about a corporation. They have like a big product launch and everything is like honed and curated and perfect, but they're at the same time not telling, how they mistreat their women or, how they're polluting the river in order to make that particular product. So, I think makes me think we all kind of curate to a certain extent. I mean, you kind of probably curate people who, you work with is probably a different self than who you are when you're, hanging out with your friends and your family. And so it's just magnified. And as a result, I think where critical thought is really important in today's world. And if you're not
Yeah.
willing to think critically about something, you can be easily swayed.
Yeah.
So
So true. I think all the time about what's going on behind the scene. What is happening? I think a lot of things occasionally remind us, where our products come from. We hold these phones and run around. How often do we stop and think about the child labor that might be behind them overseas? I just read George Orwell's book, Road to Wigan Pier, which was a journalistic book he wrote long before 1984. And he went to the coal mines in northern England and documented the coal country and the working conditions, the living conditions, the pay, the health situations and challenges. And this is at a time 100 years ago when England was trying to be this powerhouse. But how many people really stopped and think about the number of people going down in these dangerous mines every day to keep the country running? It's a fascinating book because it just shows a reporter saying, I want to go see what's really driving this. It's getting into the true cost of everything, which is always a valuable thing to do as a journalist.
without a doubt, it's that curiosity factor, I think. And then also, I guess, sometimes we're motivated by money. And if you have a chance to go with, a big news outlet and this is what they're telling you you need to cover versus I'm going to do this on my own and freelance and tell this story of the coal mine or tell the story of, where your smartphone was made or where your tennis shoes were made. And then the thing protection that those big organizations have to not let access be available to tell the story. So, I mean, it is nuanced and complicated and complex, and it comes across in this story. I think you do a great job of having us stop and really think, who's telling this story? Why is this story being told versus another one? Who determines at what point do we stop reporting on it and move on to another story?
Yeah, I think every reporter should take a look at their last month of stories and say, what was the genesis for this story? Was it a public relations firm that called me up and cajoled me into doing it? Was it a company? Was it a government who asked me to do the story? Or is it something that I asked a question on my own and I went to find it? I went to find the answer. And I fully believe that governments, public public and private companies should have the right to suggest and to make a convincing case. If a school district's graduation rate went through the roof and they're all better and they know exactly what they did to make that better, then the community should know their taxpayer dollars are having a positive impact. And I think that's fine. But a reporter in any news organization should look at what's driving their agenda, because independence and just heading out in the morning on your own question is a lot different than being spoon fed some information and being asked to put it back out there.
Yeah,
Big difference.
there's an accountability factor, I think, as well as, like news stations. I mean, they're businesses, right? They chase ratings because if they have great ratings, then they have advertisers spending money, which just perpetuates. So certainly understandable. But with your background as a journalist, I mean, how did you approach stories?
Well, definitely tried to do the right thing.
All right.
And I'm not sure I was aware right at the get-go of how this all worked. I know and grew up at a time where investigative journalism and any I was fortunate enough to work in big city newsrooms, both at the Rocky Mountain News and the Denver Post were two of the places I worked in the city of Denver. And at the time I worked, both were funding investigative units that were sitting right beside you in the newsroom, and you'd see people come in and they were working on months long stories. And you had editors, good editors, who would come around and be in conversation with you about your choices, and editors who were encouraging you to dig into data, dig into reports, to look behind the obvious and go find source material. And, if you establish a little bit of a reputation for being willing to do that work, you'll start to get tips from folks who are finger pointing in a good way and saying, if you did that story, you should check this out because things aren't running as well over here either. So you can develop a little bit of a reputation for somebody who's willing to not um, take the face value material and just regurgitate it. So, I mean, still have all my old clips in a box somewhere, and I should go through there someday and reevaluate myself. But I can think of several stories I did on big government agency budgets and some attempts to play a little shell game with their staff moves and things like that were trying to sell the public on the fact that they were being frugal, but in fact, they were spending more money and things like that.
Yeah. Is there ever a story or is there a story today that strikes your curiosity factor that if you were to be a journalist today, go cover a story, Mark, story of your choice? Is there something that grabs your attention that you're most curious about?
I think the stories that I think need covering today are the ones that should be in our national consciousness. Healthcare, the sheer simple struggle and cost of basic human healthcare and the time and juggling of family budgets that happens around healthcare, especially with children and also late in life with adults, and the cost of elder care, memory care, things like that. Related to that is just the whole issue of hunger and food, really just documenting what number of jobs are being held by one or two parents trying to keep a family up and running these days. And then I think in combination with that, I constantly think about how do schools even begin to compete with the entertainment out there that is available to kids on phones and TV screens, and just the competing with the couch, the couch as the center of our world to sit and consume media, and whether it's games and gambling now or Netflix, on and on. Schools are expected and asked to do so much, and I'm not an apologist for them by any means. But when you really look at how much time kids are in school, you look at it 365 days a year, I think it's about 13 or 14% of the time, given 24 hours a day, 365 days a year versus 6.5 hours of school day over 180 some days. So maybe it's more like 18 or 20%, but it's a very small amount. And to think that schools are held accountable for in theory, sending all these kids off to Harvard or something is just a bit ludicrous. Something's got to change, and I think things are changing in the school world a little bit.
Yes.
But where that whole conversation with public education is going is fascinating to me, especially with some of the fracturing going on and some of the creeping in of religious schools through charter mechanisms and things like that. It's again a real splintering of something that used to pull us all together and tie us all together.
Yeah, it's interesting here in Cleveland proper, that come high school, students have a choice of which high school to go to. And a lot of it, I think, is good. If you know you have an aptitude for engineering, there's a school that focuses on the engineering skills. But in terms of splintering and fracturing, I mean, it's not like all the kids on your street are all going to the same school. I mean, it's kind of good because you have friends at school and you have friends in your neighborhood. But the things that used to pull us together, where everybody on the street would gear up for the Friday football games against the rival. If you have an artistic bend, there's an art school. If you are an athlete, there's so it's very interesting to see what's available, and almost as if it's like honing on kids' strengths versus like you have to have this complete education, you
Right.
know. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it is fascinating, and, I'm a librarian, so, of course, we see, oh, nobody likes to read anymore, and kids don't enjoy reading because of the screen, so it's a challenge, certainly,
Right.
I can't imagine not wanting to read books.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I always learn something no matter what I read. I take something away, place, I want to visit, or an issue that becomes more important because I'm seeing it from a different perspective. Even though I consciously knew whatever I watch on the news is curated, this book really made me stop and think, like, how come this story and how come not that story? Or how come this one only got so much airtime and this got more? Really making me think. So thank you for that,
Thank you.
her experience as a journalist. And I think about Malcolm Gladwell, and it's like you have to have 10,000 hours before you become a master at something. And it used to be she would be super anxious before she was sent out in the field to cover something. And now she's like doing something right up until the last minute. And then it's like she can flip a switch and, be Flynn Martin, the journalist, which I think is really kind of fascinating, that you become that comfortable at doing something that you're able to just do what you're supposed to
Yeah.
do,
Right.
instead of like agonizing.
Right.
Can we talk a little bit about her photojournalist, Tamika?
Tamika. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Another tenacious, energetic individual who sees herself, I think, primarily as a journalist as well, even though she's the one doing the videography. And she played a big role in No Lie Lasts Forever. Also plays kind of a sounding board for Flynn and occasionally will push her and counter her in key moments. And they have a kind of easy banter around their social lives and their sex lives, frankly, and just
Yeah.
they kid each other about that because Tamika is very much a free spirit and much younger, but just feisty and opinionated too. So I think they get along really well. Yeah.
They do. It's fun to be I imagine I'm riding along in the car with them because if you're
Yeah.
writing and just listening to the banter back and forth and the sense of humor that they both have. I mean, things that Flynn doesn't like language-wise, like she hates the words foul play, like what other kind of play would it be? She hates the expression, and it's funny because I think about how many times I've said it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Like, is there ugly sure? Like, just
Yeah.
fun humor, mixed amongst, what we do. And I think that's the cool thing, is that you show that as human beings, we're kind of layered and we're not all one thing. Flynn's not in your books just all journalist. She's a journalist. She's a mom. She's a daughter. She's, an ex-wife. She has a career. She has friends, now a love interest in this book. So I'm excited to see for book 3. But it's really fun to balance all that, because as we go through our own lives, I mean, there are moments where we have senses of humor. So, or
Right.
there's times where we're a little more contemplative.
Right. 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 Yeah, I mean, you've gotta it's my challenge is to try to, make sure the reader feels like the characters they're reading about really have their feet on the ground, that their three-dimensionality is the goal, but of course it's a, absurd thing to think that ink on the page is going to create some sort of three dimensionality, but that's the magic and beauty and kind of challenge of what we try to do is use ink to create pictures in your head that are, somewhat layered, like you say, that there's lots of aspects and facets to one life, and you can see how they're processing the scenes that they're taking in to help the reader process the scene too.
Right. I think that's like the genius of what you all can do as you talk about ink on a page. I'm thinking you and I speak the same words, but you put them together in a way that creates this character, Flynn, who I really, really like. And the dialogue with Tamika, like, I just want to go out and have a glass of wine with the two of them. I think it would be a ton of fun. Or go to a baseball game with them. I think that would be a
Right.
ton of fun.
Yeah.
Right. And you're able to do that because of the choice of the words you use and the order in which you do them to create that. You also create the setting about how hot it is, during the time that this story takes place, how humid it is and how things are just damp. And I'm like, oh my God, get it. Been there. Oh, it was nice to read because it was been really cold here. So
Yeah.
there's that. But I just think it's a gift and to be able to see kind of their thought process to help understand the choices that they're making. I mean, they become real people to me as a reader. So I can't imagine what that must be like for you as a writer to create these characters.
Well, it's a lot of practice and it's a lot of just paying attention to thousands of other great writers who've come before and just sort of watching how they do it and trying to find my own voice and trying to just apply all that. I think we all are basically, every book is sort of paying some sort of respect to all the books that have come before it. There's no way there are some extremely wild, individual books that just are completely singular voice, but for the most part, we're playing with some conventions, we're playing with some reader expectations, and I think it's watching masters and their ability to pace, keep things moving, but also to have reflective moments or throw in a little deep philosophy here and there, just sort of as you're moving ahead, it's paying attention to other great writers and how they do things. So I don't know. It's a weird process to me. The older I get, the less I feel like I can explain it or teach it. I used to do and sign up for a fair amount of teaching opportunities. And now I just sometimes don't even know what I would say. I just, other than the classic, thing is just keep writing because you
Yeah.
do get better.
Do you write every day? Is that part of your routine or are you like somebody who writes early in the morning before the sun gets up or, what does your writing process look like?
Yeah. I'm a early morning guy and I have been since the mid 1980s. It's 2 hours a day. 90 minutes is fine. If I get 2 hours, that's great. And it's 5 o'clock usually, till 7 o'clock. Uh, I started before we had kids. It was really important that I had that routine going once we did have a couple of kids because that was really precious time. But now that they're grown and gone, it's my brain just starts firing at that time. And it's just now a total habit. It's not a sleep factor. I love the dark. I love the quiet. I love the just the sense of peace and focus at that time is terrific.
And there's a sense of stillness when I'm up that
Right.
early, to row. There's a sense of calm and a sense of stillness and something special. Like even if it's late at night and it's still dark and quiet, like it's not the same as that early morning and still can't quite figure out why.
I think it's, there's the chances of disruption, interruption, something happening. You can definitely deal with the phone, leave it in another room if you want to, but you can really minimize the chance of disruptions at that time. And you become to respect that time. And I'll be spending all day kind of in the background of my mind, knowing where I am in my story and getting ready to think about, it's writing time. It's not thinking time when you get up. You're ready to put some
Taking
words
all
down.
those thoughts you did have and yeah.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
yeah.
What's the difference between writing a series, because I know you have the Allison Coyle's series versus a standalone and now a trilogy. How is that different?
Not much different. In fact, it's the first in the Alison Coyle series I thought also was a standalone, and then it did pretty well. I'd written an earlier draft of that book and had gone on to write some other things. And I really thought it was a standalone. When it did really well, it hit the Denver Post bestseller list, my first book, and it was getting some nice reviews. And then I happened to be talking to a publisher, and they were interested in seeing her come back for number two. And then I picked up another contract with a company called Midnight Inc., which has since gone underground, or lost its mojo. And they wanted books 3 and 4. I mean, I think I sold them on keeping it going too. But, I mean, you take your character and you come up with a new challenge for them. It is sort of interesting. I mean, I read a lot of series, I read a lot of standalones, but standalones are kind of neat because you can actually buy the fact that an amateur detective would maybe get involved in something. When you read story after story with an amateur detective, whether it's Alison Coyle or Flynn Martin, you can stretch credibility in terms of the real world, but then the readers of crime fiction love a good character, and they don't care if they have 20 different murder cases they solve. They want to see Harry Bosch figure it all
Yeah.
out, or whatever it might be, time after
Yeah.
time after time.
Yeah, I think about Jessica Fletcher. So long as I don't see her in the hotel I'm checking into, I know I'm good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Cabot
Yeah.
Cove was, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
As a reader, I can say, and you're a prolific reader as well, that I enjoy a series. There's something very comforting about, I mean, even though that they're in some tough situations and challenging situations, there's something comforting about coming back to the page to settle in and hang with Flynn and Tamika for a while and see what Michael's advice is for Flynn. There's a great comfort in that as a reader. And so thank you for that.
Well, we all know there's darkness every day, and
Mhm.
we wake up in the morning hoping the darkness doesn't come to our door, but
Mhm.
there's darkness coming to doors all over the country every day. And there is comfort in knowing you can dive into a world where somebody's going to go out and confront that darkness. And it's great to know who you're riding along with, who's on that horse.
Without a doubt, I think it's Hank Philippi Ryan that says it's always safe inside of a book. And we all read for different reasons. Some of us read to learn, some of us read to be entertained, some of us, read to just escape or to see ourselves in a book. So the gift that you all as writers give to us as readers is, I don't know how you say thank you for that, because that's such a great gift. The other thing I had to like talking about fun lines in this story, you have the assistant news director, Vasquez, talking because she's Rick Goodman is basically kind of priming her to take over the news station when he retires. But talking about like we have a weather desk, how come there's not a murder desk? And it's just these little like asides, these little observational humor that wow, that's true. So
Yeah.
it's quite fun, and then I also think sometimes as a journalist or a meteorologist, it's so hard to get the weather right. I just don't we have all kinds of technology and radar and everything else, and they tell you it's gonna snow, and next thing you know, it's sunny. So,
Yeah.
things can change rather quickly, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've certainly enjoyed talking to you, but as we kind of start to wrap up, this is Story's End, so the final 5 questions for you. So
I'm
question
ready.
number 1.
I think I'm ready.
If money were no object or travel, what would you buy season tickets to?
I would buy season tickets to see the Boston Red Sox every single day, and I would go on the road with them and just take in every inning, every pitch, every hot dog. I'm a
Absolutely.
vegetarian, so that really wouldn't work, but, you get
No.
the idea.
Yeah, there's nothing better than being at the ballpark and being able to
Yeah.
hear the crack of the bat and that the smell and the punk in the glove. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
If you could travel with Flynn, Tamika, or Goodman, who would you travel with?
Boy, wow. Tamika would be so much fun. I'm going to take Goodman off the list. I guess it would be Flynn. I mean, Flynn just has had the experience. She's seen so much. I think she would be a very smart companion to have along. Just the conversation would be endless, but Tamika would make sure Tamika would make sure you're on the dance floor and going out to see music.
Mhm.
She'd
Making sure
always
you were
be
fed.
down for Yeah, yeah. So tough choice, but I'll slight lean toward Flynn. Great question.
If you couldn't be a writer, what would your other career path be?
Well, bass guitarist for a good touring rock and roll band. I do play bass in a couple of bands here in Southwest Colorado, and I just love the whole band process of being in a conversation with 4 or 5 other bandmates, trying to figure out a song, trying to pull it together, and I love playing live. It's a blast.
It is certainly fun. There's nothing better, I think, than live performances, whether it be a music of a band, whether it be a baseball game, whether it be another performance. Live is always cool, that
Yep.
interaction, that energy with the crowd and the person performing. What is your favorite life hack?
I think about this all the time, and I wish I knew all the other life hacks because I think I still do everything the wrong way, especially when it comes to technology. I really don't think of myself as any sort of pioneer on any of those fronts. I'm constantly looking over other people's shoulders to see how they do things because I'm the one who's thinking that everything is taking me 5 times as long as it should.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure I'm the author of any. There should be a book or somebody should have a website for those I'm sure there is one.
Yeah.
Easy life hacks. Yeah. Boy, that's a great question also. I'm going to pass.
Since you play bass guitar, right, and you're in bands, what song would always be on a road trip playlist?
I will say Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers, Roadrunner. Yeah. One of the all-time great early punky songs, and I'm still a huge Jonathan Richman fan, but I grew up I was 10 when the Beatles hit. I loved punk. I loved grunge. I love music today. I have a local 2-hour show on the local community radio station here in Cortez, Colorado. And I just love soaking up new music and bringing that out every week too. It's just a blast.
Yeah. I think it was your book where the Ramones got their name, which I thought was quite fun.
Yep, that's a great trivia question. If
Yeah.
anybody doesn't know the answer to that one, look it up. It's
Yeah,
Beatle
and
related.
it is Beatle related, and then having worked in a classical radio station for several years before I became a librarian, selling, writing commercials or whatever, the tidbit about Tchaikovsky and holding his chin, it's just there's so much fun stuff in here. There's big questions, but there's this balance and this harmony where they all come together. And so just a wonderful story, Two Truths and a Lie. So thank you
Thank you,
to those
Jennifer.
of you who are listening. Mark, a huge thank you for taking time to talk to us about your latest book, Two Truths and a Lie, just published. It's in the Flynn Martin series. You have one to read to get caught up. No Lie Lasts Forever. And then I will say that Flynn Martin is a great character who is just as human as she is talented, the kind of journalist we all need on our side. To find out who else is visiting, go to storytocount.com. This is Story to Count with Jen Jumba.